Hey, welcome back, families, to the Call to Love podcast. I am so grateful, as always, that I get to share in these few moments with you on a weekly basis. It is such an honor to be able to walk this journey of adoption and foster care with you. And if you remember, about a month ago, I created an episode that was really an update on kind of where the Lord had me. I've shared some pretty honest and vulnerable feelings of where I was at the time, coming out of the summertime and going into the fall schedule and all the things going on. And I mentioned something called block care. And the Lord has just really had me camped out in this all summer long. I actually taught it to our support group a few weeks ago, and we are going through it as a team on my agency side of things. For those of you who don't know this about me, I actually work for a private foster and adoption agency here in my state, and my team is leading a study on a book called Reclaim Compassion: The Adoptive Parent's Guide to Overcoming Blocked Care with Neuroscience and Faith. This is a book that was co-written by Lisa Qualls and Melissa Corkum. I would love to eventually have them on the show, but I didn't want to delay because I told you guys that I would create an episode all about this idea of blocked care. I got to tell you, this book is only a few years old, but I wish it had been written much, much sooner than it has been, because as soon as I picked up the book, I was barely even into the intro and I started underlining things. This book is so just covered and underlines and post-it notes and all the things to remind me to go back and remind myself, because I feel so seen and understood in ways that I really wish I would have had the benefits of this education sooner. So I didn't want to delay in getting this out to you and understanding and really being able to start to take steps to overcome this experience of blocked care, because it's very real. And let me just say, as we get started, guys, this is actually something you can experience with your biological kids as well, especially when you're in seasons of high stress and high need and your body's in survival mode. We're going to dive into all of that today. But this really is very, very specific to the book. Is actually for adoptive parents, but I believe it absolutely applies to our foster kiddos as well. So wherever you find yourself as you're listening to today's episode, I believe that understanding and overcoming blocked care will be a subject that will bless you, that will help you, and that will encourage you. So without further ado, let's get started. I was talking to one of the foster dads that I serve at our church a few weeks back, and I was actually giving him a copy of this book. And we were just taking a few moments just to kind of talk about the experience that he and his wife are having with their current foster daughter and moving towards an adoption plan. And we were just talking about tired hearts and tired minds and tired bodies. And I looked at him, I said, you know what? I was out watering my plants. It was still in the heat of the summer in Arkansas. It's miserably hot, and it just absolutely obliterates your garden. It obliterates your flowers. And by that time of the year, and really still where we're at here in early September, everything just looks withered and tired. And I said, that's what I feel like represents where I'm at right now. Just this place of feeling so withered, of going through the motions. And quite frankly, if I'm honest enough with myself to say, I'm emotionally disconnected as a result of just a very high demand season. And so we hear that commonly talked about as just kind of being in survival mode. And there's almost been this norm that's been created around living life in survival mode. And I don't believe that that's what God wants for us, because He designed our bodies actually to fight against that. And that, my friends, is actually what blocked care is all about. So when we are drained and when we are worn down by the high needs of our children, we can experience what is called blocked care. Now, I hadn't heard that term until recently. I was introduced to this entire concept last year, about a year ago, and it has rocked my world. So if you're not familiar with blocked care, and if you're not there now, chances are that you will be, or you are headed there, or you might be coming out of it. And so there's always in the realm of caregiving and trauma and adoption and foster care, this idea of blocked care can fit into that experience. And so being aware of what it is and how it affects us and how we can overcome it is really going to be a game changer, especially when the days, the nights, and the seasons are hard. So You might be asking me, and I'm sure you are at this point. You're like, get to the point, Summer. What is blocked care? Okay, according to Reclaim Compassion and according to the authors of this book that we're going to be referencing today, blocked care is a self-protective mechanism in the central nervous system that is activated by excessive stress. I'm going to say that again. Blocked care is your body's way of protecting itself through the central nervous system, right? God designed our bodies down to the most finite detail, and He placed this within us as a self protective mechanism because our bodies were not designed to experience long term and excessive stress. Now, when we experience blocked care and that protective mechanism starts happening in our central nervous system, activated by our brains, this suppresses the higher brain functions that are needed for caregiving, causing your central nervous system to develop a defensive stance toward your child. Okay, so I want to put that in perspective for you. I'm in a full-blown football season with both of my sons. We're traveling for a game this evening as we speak, as I'm recording this episode. And I'm picturing this in terms of we've got two players on opposite sides of the line, and they are ready to go head to head and push and shove and get past, and they are combating back and forth against one another. Well, that is this idea that blocked care is giving us, that instead of us walking side by side and in places of caregiving and affection and nurture with our children, it actually places us on opposite sides of the line. It's the best analogy I've got for you guys because I'm in football brain right now. Can you tell? So that is something that just really got my attention when I thought about, as a parent, you don't ever want to be against your child, right? You don't want to be on opposite sides of your child. I mean, yes, you're going to have squabbles and you're going to have disagreements and that sort of thing. But when it comes to nurture and love and caregiving, you don't want to be going against your child and your body actually creating this idea and this stance of being in a defensive posture from the high need, the high behaviors, the difficult challenges that you might experience with your child, wherever you find yourself in that. So here's a little checklist for block care, just to give you some perspective as we get going today in our conversation. You might be experiencing blocked care if you are discouraged by the challenging behaviors to the point where you just want to give up the fight. You might be experiencing a lack of empathy over just repeated behaviors or struggles that just don't seem to be improving. You might be just meeting needs and going through the emotions without truly emotionally connecting with your child. You guys hear me say this phrase a lot, right? Keep the tiny humans alive. And we laugh about that, we joke about that. But if all you're doing is this kind of mechanical meeting the needs and not embracing emotionally and connecting with your child, you might be experiencing blocked care. If you are just physically and mentally exhausted. Now, this is true for a lot of things in life. Again, it has become the societal norm for us to be in this high intensive pace at all times, and that is taxing on our minds and on our bodies. And then you add in this extra component of trauma, of difficult behavior, of sleep disturbances, of all of the different things that can encompass the experience of foster care and adoption. We just find ourselves physically and mentally exhausted. Here's another one. This is a tough one, and I had to really wrestle through this. But if you're honest, you may be experiencing blocked care if you are struggling to like your child or even want to be around them. Like when your child walks in the room or you hear them open the door, are you excited to see them? Or does something in your heart and your posture actually kind of sink because you're just anticipating whatever it is they're going to say or do or ask of you? Are you feeling like you're losing a little bit of yourself, who you are, your joy, your energy, and just your overall good attitude and well-being for your day-to-day life? Think, are you just kind of robotic right now? I don't mean to discourage you with all of these questions, but again, when I was going through this, I was reading this and I thought, oh my goodness, I feel seen. Because deep down, I was experiencing a lot of this. And the whole time I was just beating myself up for thinking, I'm just a horrible person. I'm a horrible parent. I don't have what it takes. I'm the one that's lacking because I can't overcome these things that I'm thinking and feeling, when in fact, this is actually a mechanism that was built within our bodies to respond to the high stress and the high needs that we sometimes experience with our kids. So, if you are interested in learning more about this, I cannot recommend this book enough. Again, Reclaim Compassion. There is actually a checklist at the beginning of the book. There's a quiz for blocked care. I've done all of those, and I think it is a really, really helpful tool just as you're gaining some perspective and you're really diving into this entire concept. So, today is really going to be an overview. I'm going to share some things that I have pulled from the book for myself personally, but there is so much more. So, I cannot, again, recommend this book enough if you're interested. And I'll put the link in today's show notes so that you can access it easily. Now, as you're kind of evaluating, maybe had to pause, re listen to kind of that checklist that I was sharing with you, compare that to where you find yourself. Again, don't be discouraged if you're like, okay, I just checked every one of those boxes mentally. Like, yes, I am experiencing all of this. Friends, this is just an indicator that your brain and your body are doing their job, working to protect you. And there are ways to rest, to heal, to connect with our kids, and to overcome blocked care. So, I want to talk about 5 different ways in today's episode that we can do that. And again, there are so many more that we can hone in on, but these were kind of the big 5 that I took away just in going through this book and experiencing blocked care myself over the course of the summer. Number 1 is to recognize and to release our expectations. Now, we've talked about expectations before in different episodes and just how they can affect how we interact with our kids, how we go through our adoption experiences for those of us who are still waiting for that to be fulfilled. But this is speaking specifically to the expectations of who our kids will be and how they will act in our care, how they will interact with us on a daily basis. So think for a moment before you adopted your child or before you welcomed your foster child into your home. Think about how you imagined day-to-day life would be. Did you imagine just this wonderful connected experience with your child where you had a little girl that was twirling with you in the kitchen, or you had a little boy that was playing basketball or catch with you out in the yard? Did you envision sweet moments of reading books and making cocoa and watching movies and those types of things? And has that proven untrue or less frequent than you would have imagined when you were dreaming about what your experience with your children would be? And so, with that, think about how those expectations might affect how you are interacting with your child on a regular basis. What are your conscious expectations of your children in the day to day? And then what are your unconscious expectations of the kids in your care? I would imagine that the unconscious is kind of that dream idea that we had when we first started imagining these children that God would place in our homes, that He had planted in our hearts truly. Conscious expectations for parenting, I think, are pretty general. And we've talked about that on the show before of fair expectations in parenting with our kids. The scripture is very clear about, children being obedient to their parents. We have order in our homes. We have chores that need to be done. We have practices of just respect in the way that our kids respond to us and the way that they obey us. Doing well in school, being kind to others. All these different things are conscious expectations that hopefully we're communicating to our kids so that they understand that those are expectations in our homes. But then we have the unconscious ones, like we're talking about, of why doesn't this child snuggle with me more? Why does this child not want me to hug them? Why does this child want to automatically be combative with me when I give them a direction, or those types of things? Take a moment, maybe even today or this week, journal and think about those things, and just jotting them down and seeing them right before you in, black and white on paper can be really, really telling as to where the root of some of your experienced block care might be coming from. And that might be your expectations. The book talks about something called a blank slate mentality. Along these lines of expectations, we go to bed exhausted. We wake up the next day and think, okay, it's going to be better. Tomorrow's going to be the day that it's going to click with my child. They're going to connect with me. They're going to behave. They're going to obey, whatever that might be. A blank slate mentality, even on a daily basis with a child that is permanently yours through adoption or a child that's been in your care for a long time, blank slate means you wake up every day and it's a blank slate. You don't know what's coming, but you're not creating these expectations that are going to set either you or your child up to fail. A blank slate mentality says, I wake up every single day knowing that I'm choosing to love my child come what may. Whether the behaviors are difficult, whether the needs are high, whether I'm exhausted, I'm not just going to automatically be defeated and have my mind made up that it's going to be bad. I'm going to come into this going, okay, what's going to happen today? And I'm going to ask the Lord to guide me through. So in our house, this is going to sound really terrible, but I'm just going to be honest with you guys because we're a family here on Call to Love. We call it roulette with our daughter. We just don't know which way it's going to go. And most mornings I wake up and I don't even realize it now until I started diving into this idea of blocked care. I would tense my body. My shoulders would be tight. My neck would be just kind of like hunched down into my shoulders. And I would almost be bracing myself for the crying, the fits, the crabby mood, the complaining, just starting our day just in a very, very negative headspace. And sometimes we would go in and wake up our daughter, and this still happens, by the way, and she just pops out of bed and she's bright and she's cheery and she's compliant and she's not upset about leaving for school or whatever it might be. And I feel this release in my body going, oh, okay. And then I kind of don't know what to do because I was bracing for the fight. I was bracing for the bad attitude. I was bracing for the negative response that I was anticipating. And I would literally feel my body release that tension. And it was amazing how that affected me physiologically. So a couple of weeks ago, I had to travel for work and it was going to be an overnight trip. And I never know how those days are going to go. But typically, if she sees a suitcase and she knows that mama's leaving, it is not a pretty experience. It's really rough. There's lots of tears. There's lots of clinging. There's lots of combative behavior. There's lots of things that we experience. And I was in my bathroom getting ready. I think I was putting my makeup on and she had gotten out of bed and she came into the bathroom and she saw me and she was like, "Are you going on a trip?" And I said, "Yes." And I kept my, everything just very positive and very simple answers and not over explaining anything. And she said, "Oh, are you going to work?" And I said, "I sure am." "Well, what are you going to do there?" "Well, I've got some meetings today and tomorrow, but I'll be back and your Mimi's going to pick you up from school and Daddy and your brothers are going to be here at night for dinner and to take you to school. And it's going to be great. And Mom will be back at this time and we'll all meet at church." And, kind of gave her a little bit of the rundown and she went, "Okay." And she walked out of the bathroom and she got herself ready for school and packed her lunch and went out the door without a fuss. And I just thought, thank you, Lord. And I didn't know what to anticipate that morning. And so having that blank slate mentality of, okay, this could go either way, and either way is okay. And I'm going to be intentional in keeping myself regulated, knowing that I can't control how she's going to respond, but I can control how I respond. So I hope that's helpful in understanding and explaining a little bit of just that blank slate mentality. We go into that. Honestly, it's scriptural. His mercies are new every morning. God goes into each day with us with a blank slate mentality of he doesn't know if we're going to be obedient. He doesn't know if we're going to praise him or if we're going to whine and complain and be ungrateful. And that is true in our parenting as well. It could go either way, but he is there. He is present. He chooses to love us and he is available to embrace us if we will go to him and embrace him as well. I've been listening to a sermon series by Pastor Robbie Gallaty of Long Hollow Baptist Church in Tennessee. And he was talking about this idea of our choices. And I think it ties in beautifully with this idea of a blank slate mentality. When we choose to praise God, his presence joins us. His presence is with us. And so his phrase for that was when our praises go up, his presence comes down. And he also said, you will never sense his presence when you complain or pout. And I thought, how true is that for us in our parenting? With blocked care, when our kids are just repeatedly grumpy, when they are pushing us away, when it is just really difficult to be around them because they're just really stuck in this negative bias, we want to remove our presence from our kids. We just don't want to be around that because it's draining, it's exhausting, and it brings us down, especially if we're trying and fighting really hard to choose our own joy. So I thought that was a really, really encouraging reminder of how, once again, the way the Father parents us is the way that we can mirror that and parent our children, and being available, understanding that every day is a blank slate, but we can choose to love, we can choose to connect, and we can choose presence. I struggle with this one, guys. It sounds really pretty and spiritual what I just shared with you, but it is difficult in the day to day because I just think, why does my child not get this? I don't understand. Maybe it's a repeated behavior that you're struggling with your children. And you're like, how many times do I have to say this? How many times do I have to correct this? How many times do I have to direct and instruct? But life as a parent is a series of ongoing sowing of seeds and giving direction and correction and boundaries. And that is something that we will do for the remainder of our parenting journey, even as our kids grow into adults. And so, along those lines, the book also talks about this idea of radical acceptance. And this just means that you are accepting something or someone exactly as they are. Now, this does not mean necessarily that you agree with or approve of their behavior or their choices, but it allows your brain to stop fighting against the reality. And I think that's the key here because we're talking about our own physiological response to this high stress of blocked care. So, to allow our brains to release the expectations, to go at every day with a blank slate, and to have a radical acceptance of who our children are, understanding that just like us, we are all growing, we are learning. Sometimes it takes longer in certain situations, in certain behavior patterns, in our brains learning to rewire themselves, especially if they've experienced trauma. But if we stop fighting against the reality, we're not head to head with our kids on opposite sides of the line, then we're able to take those first steps towards overcoming blocked care. I was thinking about this as we were going through this with our group a few weeks ago. I know many of you, if not most of you listening, are familiar with or have seen the movie Forrest Gump. And it's a classic. It's one that it tells a lot of stories, but the main character, obviously Forrest Gump, falls in love as a child with his little neighbor, Jenny, this beautiful little girl who we know is experiencing extreme abuse and neglect. And over the course of her growth, she responds to that trauma and that abuse by just making repeated terrible life decisions, choosing bad boyfriends, just very self destructive behavior, not allowing herself to be loved in a safe place. Boris just was a safe place who just wanted to love her and care for her and was always one that she could come back to, but she would flee from over and over and over again. And that really is this idea of self protection. And even though her self protection was destructive and ultimately was the reason why she met her end, sorry, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, but I told my husband when I was thinking through this, I'm like, that's really what it is to love somebody with trauma, to watch her story unfold and to watch her respond to the circumstances that she experienced in life and the abuse that she experienced. That is a self-protection mode that is really, really hard for us to understand. And the same is true for us, especially who we are welcoming kids into our homes who have experienced previous trauma, whether it's abuse, neglect, being in orphanage situations overseas where there is very little nurture to no nurture. These kids learn to survive. Their brain teaches them to survive and self-protect. And we're over here going, I don't understand. I'm here to love you. I'm here to keep you safe. I'm here to provide everything that you possibly need. And you're fighting against me. And I'm trying to give you solutions to your trauma and solutions to your problems, and you won't listen. Well, we cannot underestimate our children's need for self-protection. And friends, this takes time. It takes so much time for us to continue to invest, just as the Father invests in us and helps us to overcome the sin struggles and the patterns that we experience. The same is true for us and our kids. And so, what happens though when our children's need for self protection is met with our own need for self protection from the hurt that we feel when our kids are constantly combating against us or demanding of us beyond what we can possibly give when it comes to overcoming their own trauma? Well, it's very easy. And that's what blocked care is. It's a disconnection, it's misunderstanding, it's hurt feelings, and it's barriers. And that ultimately is what the enemy wants. He wants that disconnect. He wants more brokenness. And so we have to lean into a supernatural God to give us the type of intentionality and the practices and the love, the sacrificial, active love of sowing seeds, of being present, of not removing our presence from our kids so that we can help them. But overcoming blocked care is no easy feat. So expectations is number one. Number two, we want to evaluate. So, if you believe that blocked care is an issue after everything that I've already shared in today's episode, I want you to take time to pause and really consider the factors. I mentioned that a minute ago when I was talking about going through that checklist and expectations. Think about where those might be coming from. If you suspect that block care is an issue for you right now, what is your child experiencing and what are you experiencing that has gotten you to this place? So, for those of you who you can say, okay, yes, I'm there. I'm right there with you right now. Holy cow, I feel so seen, blocked care. Yes, I'm in it. What factors led to this? Are you in a season of high stress? Are there certain behaviors that are just really creating a disconnect between you and your child? Has there been a change in routine? I mentioned that we go through this just about every summer. When school is out and there's a disruption to change in routine, it is very common for our children's brains to react and their bodies to react and their behavior to be a result of that reaction. And it is very, very difficult, even though you think, oh, summertime fun and poolside and books and, vacations and all the different things. But actually, it wreaks havoc in our household and on my daughter's brain, especially when we don't have that change in routine. Also, it might be a change in circumstances. And so, for those of you who might be fostering, is it family visits? Has there been a disruption in that? Has there been a change in the case plan where now it was reunification and now you're looking at adoption because the biological family has not been able to work their side of the case plan? Have you moved recently? Have you added another family member? Are there any dynamics that have changed that have caused a disruption? So take some time to evaluate maybe what might be at the core of this disruption that is leading to difficult connection, difficult interactions, and blocked care. Number 3, regulate. This is one we talk about it a lot in adoptive parenting. It is something that is a constant challenge. It goes back to that supernatural grace that we have to ask the Lord for, because sometimes when we are overtired, overstimulated, overworked, and the demands are just beyond what we can control, it is really, really difficult to stay regulated. And I want you to hear me say that. It is difficult. I am not expecting you to go, okay, regulate yourself, get it together. We are told as foster and adoptive parents the importance of keeping ourselves regulated. But what do we need to do to accomplish that? So here's just a few things that I jotted down that were great suggestions from the book. Number 1 is exercise. I'm really terrible at this, guys. It doesn't have to be anything intensive. Even just a walk can change your body chemistry and your brain chemistry. Think about things that regulate your central nervous system. Is it just stretching? Is it going for a quiet walk? Is it going for a run? For some of you people, y'all love to run. I don't understand it. I'll walk with you anywhere I can't run. But some of you, that works really well for you. Some of it is a little bit more intensive workout with a lot of cardio, with weights and different things like that. But do those things to release the stress in your body, because stored stress in your body actually can hinder your body's ability to function. It can hinder your immune system from working effectively. And so I would definitely encourage you to look into what exercise best suits your season and your physical ability. Sorry, I had to pause on this because another fun game that you might play with your spouse, for those of you who are listening and you're married, write down those things that regulate you on an index card and don't show one another, and then compare notes and see if you are actually aware of what your spouse needs to be regulated. This is key, because if you're in a high stress season and both of you are overextended and neither one of you understands what you need to be regulated, then not only are you going to be pitted against your children, but you're going to be pitted against your spouse. And again, this is what the enemy wants. And so we've got to have some tools in our belts to be prepared and to know what our bodies need in order to regulate so that we can effectively connect and overcome this blocked care experience. So mindfulness is a great one. This can sound a little bit strange, maybe even a little bit secular, but I don't mean it to sound that way. Mindfulness is just taking a moment to pause and be aware of what's going on in your body. And so, like, even as you're listening right now, is there a part of your body that you're holding tense? Your shoulders, your back, your neck, your hands, your ankles. Like, are you tense anywhere in your body? Are you breathing shallow? Are you just trying to rush through? Or are you taking intentional deep breaths and allowing your body just to relax and to oxygenate your blood? These are practices for mindfulness that I think are really, really helpful. And I'm amazed at how often I hold tension in my body, and I have to catch myself and pause and be intentional and tell my body, to relax. So be aware of that. That's a great suggestion. Another one is to decrease your mental load. So what is it in your life right now that you can possibly lay down that maybe that's for later, but that's not for right now? Think about what is most pressing, what is priority, and what can be laid down. Something else that is really, really helpful is to establish what they call anchors in your day. And so these are solid, predictable events that hold your day in place. So, what are things that your family knows are going to happen on a daily basis? Is that everybody gathers around the breakfast table in the morning, and as we're pouring our cereal or buttering our toast, or eating our cereal bars, whatever it might be, you're talking about the day, you're maybe reading a scripture over them, you're saying a prayer before everybody goes out the door. Is that an anchor? Maybe it is dinner time where everybody's been all the places all throughout the day. They're coming in from work and school and practices and all the different things. But everybody knows at this time, we gather at the table and we share a meal together and we pray and we talk about our day and we laugh and we tell funny stories. Maybe it's bedtime. Maybe your kids have an expectation that they know after bath and brushing teeth that they get to choose a book from their bookshelf and mom and dad are going to sit with them and they're going to read this fun book, or maybe it's a family devotional. These are examples of anchors in your day that are solid and predictable events that create stability and felt safety with both you and your children in the home. And it is a game changer for overcoming blocked care when you have those. For those of you who have kiddos in the home who need lots of reminders, maybe that's a point of frustration for you. Post visual checklists and maybe even meal plans so everybody knows what's coming. I think I've shared this with you guys before, but I'll share it again. On Sunday nights or Sunday afternoons, depending on what we have going on, we have Colbert Family Meeting. Everybody gathers, whether it's in the living room, whether we're sitting out in the backyard, whether we're driving in the car on the way home from church. We have Colbert Family Meeting, and everybody pulls up their calendars, the different emails that are sent from the different teachers and things going on from sports practices and events for the week. And we talk about everything that's going to be going on for the week to come. And it just allows us to kind of anchor ourselves and create expectations of what we know is coming. So every day is not something has popped up unexpectedly and we're suddenly stressed about that. So that's been really, really helpful. I am not the best at creating meal plans. I would love to say that I am. I have learned, though, that the best way that I can manage my week and providing meals for my family is understanding what our schedule is as soon as everybody leaves for school and work in the morning, at 8:30 in the morning, I am meal prepping for dinner that night. And it might be putting something in the crock pot. It might be chopping vegetables and putting things in a baking pan that I stick in the fridge. So all I have to do is put it in the oven. It might be, okay, I go through the fridge and I evaluate, we have this many leftovers and this is what we're going to do tonight. But I am meal planning and the kids know that that's coming. And so that has been a really, really helpful thing. Lastly, another suggestion would be to allow yourself some unfocused time. A therapist friend of mine calls this white space. It is where you just allow your brain to wander. You can do that on a walk. I have a porch swing that I sit in my backyard, and that is just my place to go and just to listen to the birds, to look at my flowers, to sit out there with my dogs, and I just let my brain take a break. Because I have so many tabs open in my brain at any given point in time, it is overwhelming. And this is a very real thing where we have decision fatigue and focus fatigue. And when we have times of unfocused time or white space where our brain can wander, can just rest, can take a break, can be off duty for just a little bit, it can alleviate that decision fatigue and that focus fatigue that we really struggle with. Because when our brains are overrun, guys, and our kids are coming at us with needs and they need to be regulated, they're a lot of our kids, they have a lot of questions, a lot of demands. And if we're in that space where our brains are just overrun and we're in decision fatigue and focus fatigue, we're going to snap, we're going to disconnect, we're going to want to flee from our kids rather than lean in, answer their questions, be patient, and help them to regulate. So these are all really, really great suggestions. I hope I haven't rattled those off too fast, but they really can make a difference in overcoming blocked care. Number 4, we're moving along in our conversation today. Connect as you are able. So how do you connect with your kids? What does that look like on a daily basis? Are you able to move past just the normal questions of the day of how was your day? You doing okay? That kind of a thing. How do you really lean in and connect with your kids? Do you know their love language? Have you ever researched that? Have you ever had those conversations with them, especially for your kids who are older? But it's amazing how you can start to see the needs of your kids, whether that's physical touch, whether that's quality time, whether it's acts of service, whether it's gift giving, all the different things. There can be challenges when you have a different love language than your spouse and when you have a different love language than your kids. And so again, that's where we lean into this asking of the Lord for his guidance and his supernatural love and strength to step outside of ourselves and what we need and see the needs of our people. So how do you connect with your kids? What is their love language? The other thing that is, it sounds very basic, but hug your child. And when we hug our kids, this actually releases oxytocin into your body from the pituitary gland. And this can actually lower your heart rate and your cortisol levels, which is your hormone that is responsible for high blood pressure, stress, and heart disease. And so, even like a 30-second hug, guys, with your family, with your spouse, with your kids, that actually triggers your brain to release something that is beneficial for your body. Same thing with eye contact. It also releases oxytocin, which this is also the chemical that is responsible for the feeling of love and bonding. And so you really might not want to do this. Your kids may not really want to do this, but if you are able to give your family a hug for 30 seconds or more and make eye contact when you're having conversations with them, your body actually will respond in a way that is beneficial for itself and then for connection with your loved ones. Another great example of connecting as you are able is shared experiences. What are the things that you like to do with your child? Nothing over the top. It doesn't have to be expensive. I don't want you guys to feel like you have to go out and manufacture magical moments. That is not the goal here. Something as simple as, if you got boys or girls, our daughter loves this too, toss a football, play basketball, play fun games, draw with chalk out on your driveway if it's a nice day or a nice evening, sit and color together at the same table, do a puzzle, play a game, or read a book out loud together. One of our favorite books, our oldest, who is 17 years old, he's my man child. He's about to be a legal adult. But guys, he loves the monster at the end of this book. Do y'all remember that? Are y'all familiar with that? If you're not, it's one of my favorites. It's Sesame Street, it's Grover. And we've been reading that book to him since he was little bitty. And then as his siblings have come along, we have continued to read that. No lie. 2 nights ago, I just got this idea. I was like, you know what? It's been a busy day. We've had games. Everybody's been at work. It's been crazy. And I called everybody into our room and I pulled that book out. And my husband's really good at doing Grover's voice. And so we read that. And for, I don't know, 8 precious minutes, we were sitting together. We were laughing. We were connecting as a family. And I have to be honest, I got teary eyed. Guys, I cried because these are precious, precious moments. And I'm tearing up even just thinking about it because we're so busy in our lives and we're about to move into a different season of life. And so we've got to treasure those moments and take simple moments to be able to connect with our kids. And those shared experiences will create bonding and connection in ways that you just cannot imagine. Also, sitting close by. Sometimes our kids just don't want to share words. They don't want to talk. They don't want to answer your questions. They might have brain fatigue or decision fatigue and focus fatigue from just the intensity of what's going on in their bodies or maybe what's been going on in their day. And so sometimes just sitting close by. It doesn't have to be sitting, shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes that can be perceived as a threat for our kids. And so we have to build up to that. Maybe you just sit in the same room. Maybe you sit on the same couch. Maybe you sit at the same table. Sometimes words aren't necessary to connect, but your calm presence can be enough to help you in those steps to overcoming blocked care. Okay, number 5, and we'll be done with our conversation for today, and that is to redefine success. The book says, when you are in blocked care, you are easily overcome by negativity bias. When you are experiencing extreme stress on a daily basis, everything happening between you and your child is colored by a negativity bias. And so that goes back to that checklist that I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation today, where you just feel defeated. Like nothing you're doing is working, nothing is improving, every day feels the same or worse. And so you just have this filter that you see everything through, and it is one of defeat and negativity bias. So that's where we need to look at redefining success, taking even the simplest things, the simplest wins, and celebrating them like they are the ultimate success. So, what does success look like for you in your current season with your family? And keep in mind that this is going to change over time as your child develops skills and growth. You're going to see different wins, and eventually you're going to look back and you're going to see what has added up to culminate in an incredible success story. But it is really hard to see those wins in the day in and day out. And so maybe you actually get a respectful response from your child and you stop and you celebrate that as a win and you point that and go, thank you so much for being respectful in how you responded to me. Maybe you sent your child in to go and put away their laundry and they did it without whining or complaining. That's a huge struggle in my house, by the way. Every time we ask our daughter to put away her laundry, she acts like we're absolutely destroying her life. So if she goes in there and she does it with a good attitude, let's celebrate that. That is success for the day. The other day when I was leaving town and she didn't have an epic meltdown, that was a huge win. So what do those wins look like for you, and how can you celebrate them and say them out loud so that your children hear you celebrating them, which is going to compel them to continue to build those healthy mental patterns of positive thinking rather than this negativity bias. That's going to be a huge win in overcoming blocked care. I hope all of this has been encouraging to you. There's so much more, as I have shared, that can be covered in the book. I cannot encourage you enough to go out and research this more, but I want to leave you with this. As the Lord has been walking me through and coming out of a season of blocked care with my own child, He gave me Galatians 5:22. And as you know, this is the fruits of the Spirit. And it is something that we hear in Sunday school all the time. And it is something that we go, okay, yeah. But let's take a moment just to really take in the fruits of the Spirit. And then we're going to talk about that as we close out our time together today. So it is Galatians 5, and it is verses 22 and 23. And I want to read these to you and over you. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And as I was going through all of this material, I really feel like the Lord just brought me back to this place of the fruits of the Spirit and Him prompting me to hone in on each and to evaluate which ones of those I'm struggling with. Which one of those am I struggling to offer to give? Patience is always one for me. Gentleness, kindness. When you're frustrated, when you're exhausted, when you're withered like my plants in the summertime, it's really, really difficult to freely give those fruits. And so I want to encourage you, if you are in a space right now where you are experiencing blocked care, maybe you're understanding it a little bit better for the first time, lean into those fruits of the Spirit and ask God to come alongside you, to give you more of the specific fruit that you know that you're lacking. He will do that, and He will do so generously. It is a process. Again, He is parenting us just as we are parenting our kids. And there is grace. There is a blank slate. Each day, there is a blank slate, moment by moment, and He will give you what you ask for according to His will and in abundance. And so, friends, if you are finding yourself in a season of blocked care, just know that you are seen, you are loved. This is a natural response that God has designed in your body. We don't want to stay stuck there. We want to overcome it. And these are just some of the tools to do it. And so let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. You can direct message me. You can send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I would love to hear your feedback and your impressions and understanding of blocked care. As always, I am so grateful for the time that we are able to spend together. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening. If you have been blessed by this podcast, would you share this with friends and family, with your churches, with ministries that might be trying to begin foster care and adoption awareness? I would be so grateful, and I am so honored to continue to serve you. Thanks for being here today, and I look forward to being back with you next week.